the first speaker in our lecture series, The Ludic Languages of Asia, Sources and Terminologies, is Amit Deshmukh. He is an associate professor at the MIT Institute of Design in Pune, and his work uniquely combines historical games research and product design. And he actually runs a course in board game design where students go from idea to a fully developed product over the course of a semester, or how long this course runs. And I first met Amit at the Board Game Studies Colloquium, which is the annual international meeting for board game scholars in Athens in 2018. And there, Amit, he presented a brilliant and novel paper on the spatial context of traditional games, drawing on his unique background in product design studies. And at the time, I was lamenting the fact that the literature written in the vernacular languages of India wasn't being sufficiently mined really for references to games and gaming cultures. And next thing I knew, Amit had taken on the task and was going through these early text in Marathi. Amit is from Maharashtra, where the local language is Marathi, and he was engaging with these early sources and looking at game references in them. So today he will present some of his key findings from medieval Marathi sources on games. So I'll give it over to you, Amit, and you can share your screens with your slides and start your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob, for the introduction. I think I'll start sharing my screen. Good afternoon, everyone in Europe, and good evening, everyone in India. I'm Professor Amit Deshmukh. I'm at MIT Institute of Design. I've been into board games for last decade, I would say. It started with exploring the traditional board games, then getting into the board game research, and of course, parallelly, designing new board games also was there. So today I'm going to talk about mapping the literary evidences of board games in medieval Marathi literature. Marathi is a language spoken in Maharashtra. It's a state in western part of India. It's a coastal state related to the Arabian Sea, and that's what my research focuses on too. Just to give you an overview, you can see the map of India over here, and the dark patch over here is the state of Maharashtra. So, as you know, the spectrum of board game variations documented displays its association with rich culture and crafts in India. So there are lots of crafts that are in India, and its board games are related to the culture of that. Most of the documentations which we find are from the regions of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. There's very little work on board game in the state of Maharashtra, though the literary documentation of sedentary games of Maharashtra is found in the book by Anand Babaji Devdar named Marathi Khelache Pustak. That is a book about Marathi games. So it includes the field games and the board games both. So basically, it's an anthropological documentation. Recently, few years back, there are agencies which have been doing extensive research in finding board games in the region of Maharashtra, definitely. But traditionally, there you find only this kind of a resource. So few games to name: Chausar, Ashtachima, which are known as Sāripata and Pat Songtyā in Marathi. They existed in Marathi households till earlier generations. And few games like mancala, Indian hunt games do show their presence on graffitis, but seldom in literature. So my research inquiry predominantly is has happened in Marathi literature and the era in context to board game. Thus, the research tries to throw light on evidences of board game mentions in medieval Marathi language literature. During the same time, board game graffitis show their existence in Karnataka, Rajasthan until the 17th century. So the inquiry is what happened to the board game culture in Maharashtra? Where did the games go? Did it acquire a different form or did they vanish? So the lecture tries to map the literary evidences of board games in 14th to 18th century Marathi literature and architecture also. and analyzes the reasons, tries to analyze the reasons behind the same. My boundaries of research definitely are the research is not an historical inquiry. The research is not a literary analysis because it's not does not go into the nuances of the language and the linguistics. Neither it's an anthropological study, but more or less analyzing the resources whatever there are, and it's a system analysis. So I use the system design model or system mapping model to analyze the Ludemies that I got and map them over here. I have mapped the situations and the cause effect of the same, and I put forward an approach for further historical and literal study. Uh, the introduction, the spread and evolution of board games in India had an interesting journey in various cultural blends. Some games originated in India, some were transmitted in India, some got transformed. There are different theories about it. As concluded by many scholars, it is very difficult to find the origin of a particular board game because sometimes it gets traced to some other areas, sometimes it's into some other regions as well. But it is still possible to track the transmission of a particular board game and build hypotheses about the same. Some board game vanished from a particular geographical area for some unknown reasons, and they reappeared in the same area after some time interval. What can be the reasons for the same? What must have triggered such exit and re-entry of board games? So I'm talking about, again, Maharashtra as a region, as you can see, which is culturally the Marathi-speaking territory. It's a medieval period, 14th century AD to 18th century AD. And you can see the different centuries where the extent of the Marathi culture, how it was. So in 13th century, predominantly the region was existed this much, whereas in 17th century, it was, I'll go to the reasons of that. And in 18th century, it spread almost 2/3 of the complete Indian subcontinent also. So that kind of varied political influences is what it has. So looking at the culture, let's look at the language first. So definitely Marathi as a language is originated from Sanskrit. It's an Indo-European stream of language. Sanskrit, Prakrit, Maharashtri, and then it got transformed into Middle Marathi and Modern Marathi. So Gatha Saptashati, 700 verses of Gatha form, language text is in Maharashtra Prakrit. This is text from 1st, 2nd century, which is there. The evolution of Marathi language also dates back to 7th century, as Yuan Sang, the famous traveler, mentions. And there's an interesting reason why Marathi became the language of the region, which is stated by Lee Novzet. He mentions that the Marathi language got royal patronage of Sevuna Yadav region in a later phase due to the fact that they wanted to distinguish themselves from the Kannada-speaking Hoysalas. So this distinction kind of gave the royal patronage to the language and it flourished during their regime. So if you look at the political regimes during that time, it starts from the Satvahans in the 2nd century to Rashtrakuts to Yadavas. Then comes the Muslim period where the sultanates, the invasions from the Khilji regimes, and the Shahis, the Nizam Shahi and Adil Shahi predominantly. Later, definitely the Mughals, the invasion of Mughals, and the rise of the Maratha power through Shivaji Maharaj, and it reached its peak in 18th century during the regime of Peshwas. And then definitely it was taken over by the Britishers in the Anglo-Maratha Wars. If we look at the region of Maharashtra geographically, you can see that this is how the map lies. This particular line over here are the Western Ghats. So Western Ghats are seen something like this, very hilly area, very difficult terrain to actually reside and work. On the left-hand side, the coastal area is something looks like that. Here is where lots of traditional ports, which were the main trade routes from very early times were there. The easternmost parts are predominantly the jungles, which look something like this. Whereas the middle part over here are the plateaus, are agricultural land. So this western region of Maharashtra, central region of Maharashtra is where these regimes kind of predominantly happen. So how does the culture evolve? Culture evolves through art, craft, attire, food, rituals, and artifacts. So Marathi culture distincts itself in all these forms. So it has a distinct art and craft of itself. It has a distinct attires of itself. It has a distinct food habits. It has different rituals and definitely a distinct artifacts that are there. So these all together kind of evolved the Marathi culture from say the 12th, 13th century till say 18th, 19th century. Uh, of course, cultural transmission becomes one of the prominent influences, and this also, I've just tried to map the kind of cultural influences which possibly are there. So if you see the green, these are the influences which happen inland, uh, predominantly the Mughal and the Persian influences. So these influences happen through invasions, through battles, through trade, through political ties in various ways. And there was definitely a Rajasthani influence. You see these kind of influences in later Marathi architecture also. There is the Kannada influence again that is there, and the Telugu influence also is there. In terms of the foreigners, definitely the British influence because that's where they came. The Portuguese influence is much more on Marathi region. You find lots of similar words in Portuguese language as in Marathi, taken from Portuguese language, of course, in Marathi, adopted in Marathi. And then there are Siddhis, the Bantu people from the Southeast Africa, which came to certain ports and they also acquired few areas over there. So in 14th to 17th century, 14th to 18th century is what this happened. And in 17th to 18th century, you see when the Maratha power was at its peak, they had their expeditions in different areas of the subcontinent. So expeditions which went till the Afghanistan border, expeditions in Rajputana, expeditions in Gujarat, uh, in Karnataka, Delhi, Odisha, and Tamil Nadu. So Tamil Nadu, Jinji is a fort. Again, Tanjavur has a certain amount of Maratha influence in Tamil Nadu somewhere over here. Okay, so these are the things from where the cultural transmission has happened. So it has brought in food, it has brought in attires, it has brought in artifacts, architecture, and definitely possibly the board games also. Uh, if you look at mention of board games, definitely cave painting sculptures are a reliable kind of source. So Ajanta and Ellora, the famous caves, uh, the set of caves that are there in Maharashtra do show the mention of board games over there. But these board games are completely different. They have a different grid. Again, which board games, mechanisms, all these things are debatable. But these are the board games which you see during the Satavahan and Rashtrakoot period because that's where these cave and these sculptures have been kind of made. Then examples of board games in other regions during the same time. These are some of the board game inscriptions, definitely from Karnataka, Rajasthan, and I think this is from Maharashtra only. And in various museums, again in Rajasthan, you see these. And on the right hand side, I have mentioned the literature, which everybody definitely knows, where uh, mentions of board games outside Maharashtra is what you see. So Manasollasa, Siyasan Battishi, Ainakbari, Krida Kaushalya. Okay, so temple inscriptions, actual pieces, and literature is what been looked into. Now, again, when we focus on Maharashtra, in Maharashtra, these are some of the pieces which you see in museums around uh, those things, and you can see different terminologies being used, interesting craft uh, practices being incorporated into this. And again, this is one of the inscriptions which you see in Pune, which is there. Uh, of course, looking at the temple inscriptions, uh, the time period of that inscriptions on the temple floors could not be dated. So that's again debatable. Still, I looked into Marathi architecture. Marathi architecture is a phase in 17th and 18th century when new temples, new river ghats. So these are typically river ghats where kind of a step, kind of a podiums and platforms will be created for various rituals across the water along the river would be there. So these are some of the temples across the western part of Maharashtra where uh, built during the Peshwa period, where you don't see the temple, the floor inscriptions of board games. At the same time, you do see temples wherein the board game inscriptions are also there. So these are predominantly from the central Maharashtra. Of course, there are many other researchers who have done extensive work in finding these uh, temple inscriptions across Maharashtra. This is just one of the glimpses which I'm showing over here. Uh, but when I looked back at these temples are built from the Yadav period, and this entire fort was under the Mughal uh, rule for a larger time. So just kind of foreseeing it, there could have been lots of other people from across India who have been, or soldiers from across India who have been coming over here. And again, debatable who has done these inscriptions, but there are many possibilities again. Okay, so basically looking at these outcomes, so games like Chaucer, Astachima, Tiger Goat, Hun Games, Navakankari, Solagutti are seen appearing in architectural inscription, literature, anthropological document outside Maharashtra during the medieval period. The dating of cave inscription in Maharashtra is difficult. No inscription in temple floors of later medieval period are observed in the sample survey which was done. Cultural influence of other cultures, Persian, Portuguese is observed. Example, many similar words in Marathi from these two languages. And political turmoil has left the region of Maharashtra struggle for basic existence. There were lots of invasions and lots of political turmoil that was happening. So finding prosperity was difficult, but later in the Peshwa period, prosperity was found. So that I have talked about this reason again. Now, again, looking at these board game inscriptions, yes, there are, but uh, there's a question mark about the dating. Actual board game and pieces, again, you can definitely trace them down, but they are not of very later period. They are very late medieval period is where you can see the existing pieces. So going back to the literary evidences of the medieval period. So what drove the literature of Maharashtra during the medieval period? Definitely, it is a Bhakti movement. Bhakti movement is a devotional movement which you find across India in the medieval period, and Maharashtra also was in forefront in that. And there's a line of devotional saints who wrote uh, literature telling people what is good, what is bad, what should be followed, what should not be followed. Okay, things like that. And two notable mentions. It starts with Santa Jnaneshwar, and the pinnacle is with Santa Tukaram. Okay, so these are two kind of pinnacle personalities into the Bhakti movement of Maharashtra. So this dates back from the 13th century to around 16th century is what this entire range is. And the pilgrim movement, you can see the photograph over here, it's still followed. In Maharashtra, people in lakhs and lakhs and numbers still follow the pilgrimage towards a religious cause. Okay, so periods of Marathi literature, what I could kind of segregate them into is the first period, uh, which predominantly is in the 12th and 13th century. Second period is again till the around 15th century, and the third period which extends from the 16th to the 17th, 18th century. So apart from the holy texts, as the prosperity came, uh, definitely there are bards, ballads, and other kind of Marathi literature which also came forward. Very interestingly, these are there, but these what are mentioned over here, this represents the century, this represents uh, the person who has written it, and the book which has been kind of referred to. Uh, so there are these kind of sources, there are compilations. Again, some are compilations done later than when the actual saint died in a later period. But again, they all lie into the middle period only. So these are some things which I was able to refer, and I was able to find something interesting through that. Now the further slides try to show the verses from these literature, and it tries to identify the mention of a game or a board game into it. So I'll just go through those references that are there, and then I will talk on the conclusion of that. So you can see the mention of board games in the 12th or 13th century, wherein this word Sāripat, okay, so is clearly mentioned into the text. You can see again during the 13th, 14th century again, there are mentions of a game piece. It's also mentioned that uh, if you play it on the uh, day where you're fasting for a religious reason, and if you play a board game on that, it will have a very dire kind of extreme level consequences. So predominantly the text tells the devotees not to play the board games during the kind of sacred or the devotional days or the fasting days which are being followed. It refrains them from playing board games. Again, there is a mention of the word Buddhibal, okay, in 14th century text. So Buddhibal is chess, okay, chess being called Buddhibal in Marathi, okay. Then again, Sāripat keeps coming back. Dyuta Karma, again, Dyut, definitely the game referred in Mahabharata, okay. So again, it's referred to gambling, maybe in that way. This is again from the 14th century text. This is from the 16th century text, wherein multiple games have been mentioned. These are not board games, these are field games and board games both. Both. So you can see various games being mentioned. Okay, I'll just move to the next. Okay, so these are the texts which are predominantly describing the acts of Lord Krishna and he playing various games with his friends on the banks of Yamuna. Okay, so while mentioning that, these games have been kind of mentioned. Okay, then you can see again in Sant Tukaram's verses in 16th, 17th century, you can see interesting list of games being played. Uh, so Tukaram kind of gives list of games that were played as a child, along with the games called as Viti Dandu, Chendu Lagori, Champe Penda, Eki Beki, Hamama, Humri, and Bhaure. Okay, I'll explain what these are. Then again, you can see not a direct mention of the board game, but somewhere mentioning that, okay, you are gambling, you are giving out something when you're playing a board game. This is mentioned in the 17th century verses of Santa Ramdas, wherein he is mentioning the attributes of a good man. Okay, so he's mentioning that, okay, these are the things which should not be done in certain ways. Again, similarly, so he's mentioning what are the attributes of a bad man, okay, or man who's not in good deeds. So he does gambling, he plays Sāripat, he plays cards, things like that. Okay, so looking at these literary references, what is the inference? So which board games appear? So this is a list of board games which I found. Sāripat or Chaucer appears. Eki Beki, a guessing game using tamarind seeds. Interestingly, the same name is mentioned in Marathi Khelate Pustak, and that's where it is. Oki Boki game with the same name. It's a game played by shells and Songtys. It's mentioned in Marathi Khelate Pustak. Buddhibad, which is chess, which is mentioned. Kavdis as Kavri shells are mentioned. Songti, a turnwood, maybe, a game piece is mentioned. Okay. So these are the games which come from these kind of literature that has been looked into. Which other games appear? So these are the games: Hamama, Humri, Viti Dandu, Chendu Fari, Jangi Bhovre, Lagoria, Vagodem, Chumba Chumbi, Kempe Penda, Seldera, and Nisar Bhuvangi. Now, these games are probably lost or transformed or are there by some other name. Okay. Whereas these games, you can find the transformation. So Hamama is something like Kabaddi, which is being played. Umri uh, is still, I was able to find the mention, but we literally see nowadays kids playing this. Viti Dandu, definitely it's there. Kendufari is a primitive form of cricket. And Bhovre are tops. And Lagoria are still being played. Okay, so these are the field games which you see being mentioned over there. Okay, games missing mention in Marathi literature, Navakankani. So it's mentioned in Marathi Khyatse Pustak by name of Fare Mari. Okay, an interesting name. From where it comes, we don't know. Sola Gutti, it's mentioned in Marathi Khyatse Pustak or also in the Indian board game survey in the Nagpur region, the eastern part of Maharashtra, but this doesn't seem to be there in those kind of devotional texts that are there. Mancala, floor inscriptions are seen in Maratha forts also, in caves also, but doesn't see it mentioned. Tiger Good Hun games, only cave and old temple floor inscriptions show those. Tabla, okay, though it's made in southern Maharashtra town of Savantwadi, but this doesn't see the mention. Mokshapat, the terms from squares appear. Actual board games are dated in the medieval period. So now the hypothesis, there are two possibilities. So board games existed, they disappeared, they somehow re-entered. And so I have taken two extremes, definitely the cave and floor inscriptions. The other extreme is the Marathi Khyantse Pustak, which is in the 19th century. So just tracking kind of what happened. So somewhere, this is first hypothesis where they disappeared and they re-entered. Or maybe mini game does not exist. There are some other games that existed. I'm not saying that board game never existed, but in some other form or some other games existed. Some games entered through, again, cultural transmission becomes one of the major reasons for that. They regain popularity, and that's how they appear in this complete description of the books. Okay. Okay, so now definitely analyzing the missing links. So existence of board games, cultural transmission, other things. So I've tried to apply system thinking, which we in design learning definitely apply more into. And just putting board game studies in India, just kind of mind mapping it or the system mapping it. What are the stakeholders? It starts, you can't just look at board games in India isolatedly. It has to be seen with these entire things together. So there is art, there is material studies or craft, there is architecture, there is history, there are religious rituals, there are cultural ties. This is a very big term, but predominantly what I tried to mention is it said that the language or the culture kind of changes subtly within 100 kilometers of where you stay. So even in Maharashtra, there are different dialects which are talked of Marathi, various influences which you saw. So that way, it's kind of very interestingly interviewed in that way. And definitely board game studies in India has to be looked from the social point of view because caste becomes a very important factor over there. So uh, if I try to put it through the design process, so if there's a board game which has to exist, which has to get done. So looking at the time period, what economic startup plays it. So it defines the kind of hardware that will be used. The user demographics also will decide what kind of games that will be there, whether it will be a quick game, whether it will be a long-lasting game, what sex plays it. So ladies playing inside houses will be different. Age group, again, knows that the mention of children played board games are very rare. So definitely the age group which plays that. Religion, it matters a lot, and caste. So there are some games which it is mentioned that of a particular caste only will play. So and some games are kind of considered of a lower this thing, not to be played by certain class. So this kind of uh, connections makes the thing interesting. So very quick mapping in terms of who played the games, when the games were played, why the games were played, where the games were played, which games were played, played with what. So this definitely expands bigger. These are just keywords which are mentioned over here. But this tries to kind of connect the dots in terms of analyzing what really has happened. Okay. Now going at a very basic reason why the games being played. So yeah, as a social interaction, games were played. What kind of became a hindrance in that? Caste and religion. Okay. Gambling is one of the another reasons why the games were played. So prosperity, if the region is not very prosper, if there are constant wars happening, if people are, it's difficult for people to have their everyday food. Uh, this definitely will forbid gambling. Gambling will not happen. Or if it is forbidden by the religion, as many of the religious texts say, uh, the popularity of the games will reduce. Religious rituals. So religious rituals earlier may have mentioned certain board games into it, but there was a renaissance in Bhakti movement, which again kind of transformed the way people think. It went more into masses, which was more into classes in that way. So that might also have affected. And spending spare time. So again, farmers or the peasants doing it before harvest, soldiers, when they are on expeditions, when they have spare time, definitely they will play game. But again, due to lots of political unrest, this also very less time for that also would be there. So what are the possible causes of rejection of board games? So lack of spare time, superstitions might be there that if you play this game, still there are certain superstitions attached to certain game that you don't play the Cody cells in the evening. So these kind of things definitely are there. Lost rules, of course. So there are very less written texts that are there, and the way the rules will transform or the things, uh, as also it has been mentioned that very complex games would not kind of be adopted quickly. So also considered alien because if people from different regions outside the Marathi cultural domain have brought these games, they might have been considered alien, might not have got popularity in that way. So that's again possible reasons that are there. Uh, Again, where the games were played. So temples as social places. Now, wherever you see inscriptions in temples, uh, the temples are built in a particular period. When temple is in use, it's a very religious kind of architecture that is there. And no one will start doing a graffiti on the floor. So, accidentally, the material also changed. It was cow dung floors that these things used to have. The structure changed from stone to wood. Okay. And so you don't see inscriptions into the temples which are in the later medieval period. The second place, again, it's a social place, river ghats, these kind of steps, these kind of podiums, platforms across Maharashtra, again, the river you see. But these were again made done during the Peshwa phase only. So you don't see games on these ghats. Village chowpas, town square, due to political unrest, again, it's very difficult to see these games over here. Forts, military outposts, of course, yes, but military discipline, political unrest would kind of slightly not let people play the games over there. And whatever games were played in private residences, they were the lifestyle products, which pieces we see in museums, very nicely crafted, and the pieces would there. So, how to play board games? There's board game hardware, there's board game mechanics is there. So only game with less hardware may be survived. Games that could be played in transit, not very elaborate kind of hardware that one could take along with him. Crafts outside Maharashtra, the board game hardware was used as gift pieces. So we see evidences of those also. Board game mechanics, of course, cultural transmission played a role over there. New rules were could have been introduced and vernacular terms mix. So this is something very interesting that we see that has been happening. Again, what is the inference and way ahead? This is just tip of the iceberg. Of course, a deeper research in medieval Marathi literature is necessary. So apart from Bhakti movement literature, the literature type should be examined. So there are something called as Bakhars, a form of historical narrative written in Marathi prose that should be examined for board game references. There are also ballads called as povadas written in an exciting style and narrate historical events in an inspiring way. So not only these, but there are rhyming couplets called as arias which are there, but these needs to be kind of examined to see the existence of board games into it. There are many vernacular terms seen in use during the playing activity of a board game. So etymology of these terms need to be analyzed. This will give evidence of cultural transmission of the game. Example, sari is something that is to be moved. Pat is a board. So sari pat. So Songtyā has come from the Sanskrit for sari caster. And these are words which definitely we don't know where they have come from. Something called as fare, mare, uh, farjit, okay, is a term that you see in Marathi Khyata Pustak also. Ghula, hul, okay, because these terms are not being used these days. So these may have connections from Sanskrit, Kannada, Gujarati, Persian, Portuguese, or predominantly a small part of Dutch, this thing also. So definitely this is something that needs to be looked into. And the third way ahead is a question can be approached from a design process point of view and redefined as why did variations happen in board game? Questioning the regional variations on board game mechanics due to influence of culture. This approach may lead us to understand disappearance of re-entry of board games in regional ways. So variations in board game hardwares, variation in board game mechanics can be mapped selecting one game. Okay, so this is what again I have been trying to do for one of the board games, but the work is ongoing. So again, uh, connecting references or ludimies, this has been mentioned as from religious storytelling, understand the semantic and semantic perceptions using approach like system thinking, which connects the ludimies and correlate. Okay, because seeing them in isolation may not work, but they have to be seen in or connection of different stakeholders also, and put forward the factors affecting being catalyst of cultural transmission. So I think rules of play, board game references, religion, caste, and influences. These pieces has to be looked into and put together to really understand what has happened with the board games. Yeah, thank you. That's all what I have from my side.